Hey guys, it's Maddie and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to do a sit down video and going to go over some of the options you have when it comes to riding and like just doing lessons, part boarding, co-boarding, leasing, and owning your own horse. I'm going to go over a few key points that are different between each level or stage of having a horse experience and just the different options that could be available to you. While I'm going through this, just kind of keep in mind each barn can and probably does do things a little bit differently depending where you are. I've only ever been at one barn since I started riding like 13 years ago, and since then things continue to change, policies change, situations change, so I can only speak to my experience from the barn I am at. And I've talked to a few other friends of mine that are at different barns and kind of got a little bit of insight from them, and this is kind of just the general consensus across the board. Anyways, so let's start off. I'm gonna work like from the least involvement and least responsibility to owning your own horse. So going from lessons to owning and everything in between. So lessons are typically paid either on a weekly or a monthly basis. My barn just implemented a monthly pay period cycle. It used to be per lesson, but now you pay for the month, and usually just one lesson a week. Typically they're either private or group lessons, up to about, sorry, there are a bunch of flies and I'm sitting right in front of the window. Usually private, so just you, up to group about like 4 or 5 riders, depending how big your ring is and how many horses are in the lesson program. But yeah, usually just 1 hour lesson where you do your walk, trot, canter, jumping, or whatever type of lessons you are taking. And you just show up, tack up your horse, ride, and that's it. You do, depending where you are, have the option to show. And when you're lessoning, you're not guaranteed to ride the same horse each week. You got to change and be used to that. That's just what you get when you lesson. So you kind of have to be pretty easygoing and go with the flow and just take everything as it comes to you. When you lesson or when you show, you'll use the horse that you typically lesson in, that you're most comfortable and confident on. And you don't, you're not responsible for any vet bills or things like that. You just show up, ride your horse, and leave. Next stage is part boarding, and that has a little bit more involvement. You usually get 1 extra ride a week, and that is on the horse that you most often lesson on. This is a little bit more flexible. If things change in the lesson program, you might be doing your extra ride on a different horse. So you're pretty much riding twice a week. Once is your lesson and then the other is your free ride. At my barn, your free ride is just flatting. You're not allowed to jump on your own. And again, you get first dibs on that horse for shows. And my barn, if you just lesson, you do have to pay a horse rental fee if you go to a show. So when you part board, that fee is waived. And I think it's typically like an extra $20 a month, give or take, maybe a little bit more. And that horse will still be used in lessons, and there may be other part boarders or even co-boarders involved in your little working situation. The next option is co-boarding, and that is an extra 2 to 3 rides a week. So it's a little bit more money, and from what I gather, it's about, so you're co-boarding, so you're paying half of the horse's monthly board. In my area, that's generally about $250 to $300, maybe up to $400 on like the higher end of a like fancier, bigger show barn or something like that. And then that horse has the potential to be used as like a lesson horse, so maybe like 1 or 2 other lessons a week that kind of work around your schedule. Most often I see you have like set days to ride, so like Monday, Tuesday, Friday, or whatever your setup and agreement is with the barn owner who owns the horse. And with lessons, part board, and co-boarding, you're not responsible for paying any vet bills, any farrier fees, or providing supplements or medication. You are just paying to ride. No ownership or like responsibility over the horse's well-being, obviously like grooming and within reason, but paying for the extra things, like if they need chiropractor or if they need to get their teeth done, you're not on the hook for those expenses. Then for leasing, this is where it gets a little bit more, not complicated, but very much dependent on your agreement and your situation with the horse's owner. So to start, there is either a on-property or an off-property lease. An on-property lease is where you ride at the same barn where the horse is being boarded by its original owner. So you're not moving the horse. So you are staying at the same barn. It's where the horse is and has been boarded by its owner. Whereas an off-property lease is where the horse is being boarded at one barn and you ride at a separate barn and you're moving the horse from its original barn to your barn and bringing it in. And then once you get that sorted out, there is either a paid lease or a free lease. A free lease is where you are only paying the barn owner the monthly board, where a paid lease is where you pay the horse's owner typically a monthly or a like yearly fee, like an upfront fee for using that horse. And on top of that, you are responsible for the monthly board cost going to the barn owner as well. So paid lease, you have two different money people to pay, the horse's owner and the barn owner. And a free lease, you only have to pay the barn owner the monthly board. And as I had kind of mentioned, with a paid, for example, in a paid lease, usually a lease has a term, so a set period of time that you'll be having the horse before you could have the option to like renew the contract or renew your lease. Most often it's a year. That's how long you have the horse. And then after that year, you'll kind of reconvene and see where you're at. Sometimes they can be like a 6 month or an 8 month or something along the lines of that. One thing I forgot to mention about the co-boarding and part boarding, they are usually on a monthly basis. So you kind of just go month to month because you're not as set in stone with what horse you're going to be riding. And then you can kind of just reevaluate after that month. I know a lot of barn owners probably would prefer more of a long-term commitment so that their income doesn't fluctuate as much, but for the most part, it's just on a monthly basis. And for leasing, from my experience, the most often you are responsible for paying half of the farrier bill. So if the horse needs shoes, you'll pay for half of that. When they get their hooves trimmed, you pay for half. Most often, the horse's owner will pay for any vet bills, any like chiropractor or massage, and I've had two different situations where one time when I leased a horse, I was responsible for buying the supplements because the horse's owner was away at university, so they weren't involved whatsoever in the lease, so I paid for the supplements. But then I had another situation, it's kind of the same situation. The horse's owner was away at school, but they still provided the supplements and I only had to pay half of the farrier bill. So that's where it kind of depends. But make sure you just have a very open, clear communication with the horse's owner so you know what you're getting into, and ask these questions before you get into your lease. Maybe once I'm done kind of summarizing this, I'll give you a few key questions to ask the horse's owner before you get involved to a certain extent. And with a lease, you are more often than not the only person riding that horse, and you are responsible for like the day-to-day maintenance of the horse, but you always have the horse's owner that will be like kind of overseeing things a little bit. And if you have any questions, you can go to them, or if there's any issues, they kind of handle the bigger things. But day-to-day stuff like any nicks or things, you will more than likely have to look after. And then finally, owning a horse. So I'm going to kind of just go over a couple of questions I would ask. The first being, how long is this lease? Well, I guess the first is it an on or off property lease? Is it a paid or a free lease? How long is the lease period going to be? Like 6 months, a year? Is there the option to renew after that? and what are the extra expenses that you will be responsible for, like vet, chiro, massage, shoes, farrier, supplements and medication, kind of things like that. So I would say those are kind of the 4 main areas I would hit. And then once you get to know the horse's owner and like the barn owner, you can kind of go from there, gauge if you have any other questions or need any further information from them. And then lastly, owning a horse, the biggest area where you have the most responsibility, because you are buying that horse, and once you have that horse in your possession and you have given the previous owner the money, you are responsible for everything. You're responsible for maintaining where they live, so whether that be paying someone else to keep them at their property, or if you're keeping them at your property, you're responsible for medications, any vet bills, so getting their teeth done, any unexpected costs if they get hurt in the field, or if heaven forbid they get sick or something, you're responsible for that. All shoes, everything you are responsible for. There is so much responsibility in owning a horse, and this isn't just for a set amount of time. This isn't for a time period. You have the horse from the day you buy them until they either die or you sell them. And all of that time in between is on you. And it's a huge, huge responsibility to look after the horse, because they're expensive animals. They eat a lot. They cost a lot of money. So it's just a lot to get into. But then again, it is your horse. You can do whatever you please with them. You can move them from barn to barn to barn. You can take them off property. You can do whatever your heart desires, and you have no restrictions on anything. You get to make the decision for the horse, for their well-being. You don't have to like talk to anyone or run it by anyone and get the okay from them. You get to make all the decisions on your own, which is a lot of freedom, but a lot of responsibility. And for a while, I was kind of under the impression, like, why would I pay to lease a horse from someone when I could in turn use that money to save up to buy my own horse? And just recently, I had the realization that I don't know where I'm going to be next year. So why limit myself and not lease in hopes to buy a horse? But I'm probably not going to buy one anyways. So I'm going to enjoy paying to use someone else's horse for a set amount of time. And I will be leasing when I get back to it in September, which is coming up very shortly. And for leasing, I'm going to be paying a fraction of the cost for the same experience. Like, I will be the only one riding this horse. I don't get as much of a say in things, but I am the only one who's going to be riding him. And he is mine for the year. But after that year is up, I'm not on the hook for paying for a longer time than I can commit to. So that is why I'm choosing to lease. And I think it's a good idea to start at the bottom and work your way up. So start with lessons. And then part boarding and co-boarding are pretty similar for the most part, except cost-wise, co-boarding is a little bit more expensive, but you do get those few extra rides in there as well. And more times than not, it's on the same horse every time, because you are paying to ride those extra days a week. So you will more than likely be on the same horse. But then going from a part board, co-board to a lease is a pretty big jump. And then from there to owning is an even bigger jump. So I think kind of slowly work your way up to more and more responsibility as you can handle and as you see fit and as your budget allows. I hope you found this video helpful and useful and got some good information and maybe learned a thing or two, and can kind of take this and use it to decide which route and option is best for you. But I will see you in my next video. Bye.